Chapter 1, The Dutch Experiment, 1609 to 1664. The silence of Mannahatta was broken in September 1609 by the arrival of the Half Moon. Captained by the Englishman Henry Hudson but sailing for the Dutch East India Company, the ship was searching for the legendary Northwest Passage to China. Hudson didn't find the Orient, but he found something else, a river rich in resources, particularly beavers. In 17th-century Europe, beaver pelts were brown gold, essential for the waterproof hats that were the height of fashion. The Dutch returned in 1624 to establish a permanent trading post on the southern tip of the island, naming it New Amsterdam. It was a corporate company town, not a religious colony. It was rowdy, diverse, and obsessed with profit from day one. In 1626, Peter Minuit, the Director General, famously purchased the island from the local Lenape sachems for 60 guilders worth of axes, kettles, and cloth. It was a tragic cultural misunderstanding. The Lenape believed they were sharing land rights. The Dutch believed they had bought the deed to the world. Under the wooden leg of its final Director General, Peter Stuyvesant, the town grew. It was a cosmopolitan port where 18 languages were spoken, but it was also dangerous. Fearing attacks from the British and indigenous tribes, Stuyvesant ordered a defensive wooden wall built along the northern border of the settlement. The wall eventually came down, but the path remained, becoming the financial center of the world, Wall Street. Chapter 2, Revolution and Ruin, 1664 to 1783. The Dutch Empire in North America ended with a whimper, not a bang. In 1664, four British frigates aimed their cannons at the fort. Stuyvesant wanted to fight, but his merchant citizens, tired of his strict rule and caring more about trade than flags, refused. The city surrendered and was renamed New York after the king's brother, the Duke of York. Under the British, the city flourished as a key colonial port, but the spirit of rebellion simmered. New York was a hotbed for the Sons of Liberty. When the Declaration of Independence was read at the Common, now City Hall Park, in July 1776, a mob rushed to Bowling Green and tore down the gilded statue of King George III, melting the lead into 42,000 musket balls for the coming war. However, the war went disastrously for the city. In August 1776, George Washington suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Brooklyn. He barely escaped across the East River under the cover of fog. The British seized New York and held it for the next 7 years. It was a dark time. A massive fire in 1776 destroyed a quarter of the housing, and the British used the harbor to anchor prison ships, where over 11,000 American POWs died of starvation and disease, more than died in all the battles of the war combined. When the British finally evacuated on Evacuation Day, November 25, 1783, Washington marched triumphantly down Broadway, but he reclaimed a city in ruins, its population decimated to just 12,000. Chapter 3, The Grid and the Canal, 1783 to 1850. New York rebuilt with ferocious speed. For a brief, shining year, 1789 to 1790, it was the capital of the new United States. George Washington took the oath of office on the balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street. Although the politicians moved to Philadelphia and then D.C., the money stayed. Alexander Hamilton founded the Bank of New York, establishing the city as the nation's credit engine. As the population exploded, the city faced a crisis of space. In 1811, the state legislature made a radical decision that would define the city forever, the Commissioner's Plan. They imposed a rigid, rectangular grid of streets and avenues over the entire island, regardless of hills, swamps, or streams. It was a design for pure capitalism, creating easy-to-sell real estate lots. Nature was bulldozed to make way for the canyons of the future. The city's economic dominance was secured in 1825 with the Erie Canal. Championed by Governor DeWitt Clinton, this big ditch connected the Hudson River to the Great Lakes. Suddenly, New York was the gateway to the entire North American continent. Wheat from Ohio could be shipped to London via New York cheaper than from any other port. The harbor became the busiest in the world. This wealth led to a massive physical transformation. After the Great Fire of 1835 leveled the old wooden financial district, it was rebuilt in granite and stone, creating the first modern skyline. Chapter 4, Blood and Stone, 1850 to 1900. By the mid-19th century, New York was a tale of two cities. Uptowners lived in marble palaces, while downtown became the landing zone for a massive wave of humanity. Fleeing the potato famine, hundreds of thousands of Irish immigrants arrived, soon followed by Germans. They crammed into the Five Points, a notorious slum built on a sinking landfill, the Collect Pond. It was a place of crime and poverty, but also cultural fusion, where Irish jigs and African shuffles blended to create tap dance. To relieve the density, the city built Central Park, started in 1857, the first major landscaped public park in the U.S., designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux. But peace was shattered by the Civil War. New York's merchants, dependent on Southern cotton, were sympathetic to the Confederacy. When the Union instated a military draft in 1863, the city erupted. The draft riots remain the deadliest civil unrest in U.S. history. For days, white mobs lynched black citizens and burned orphanages until federal regiments from Gettysburg arrived to retake the streets. The post-war era, the Gilded Age, brought unparalleled industrial growth. The Brooklyn Bridge, a steel harp spanning the East River, opened in 1883, proving that New York could conquer even geography. In 1898, the city consolidated, absorbing Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and the Bronx into one massive, Greater New York. Chapter 5, The Vertical City, 1900 to 1945. The 20th century was the era of the skyscraper and the subway. The opening of the IRT subway in 1904 allowed the population to spread out, relieving the crushing density of the Lower East Side tenements. The 1920s saw the city hit its stride as the cultural capital of the world. In Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance flourished, giving the world jazz, poetry, and black political thought. In Midtown, tycoons engaged in a race to the sky. This architectural battle culminated in the Empire State Building, 1931, which stood as the tallest building in the world for 40 years. It was finished just as the Great Depression hit. The city suffered terribly. Hoovervilles, shanty towns, sprouted in Central Park. Recovery came through the unlikely partnership of Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, the Little Flower, and the power broker Robert Moses. Leveraging New Deal money, they rebuilt the city's infrastructure, parks, pools, bridges, like the Triborough, and highways, transforming New York into a modern metropolis designed for the automobile age. Chapter 6, Fall and Rise, 1945 to 2001. After World War II, New York was the capital of the world, home to the United Nations and the center of global art and finance. But the seeds of decay were sown. The middle class fled to the suburbs, white flight, and factories closed. By the 1970s, the city was broke. The fiscal crisis of 1975 nearly forced bankruptcy. Public services were slashed, and crime skyrocketed. The Bronx burned as landlords torched buildings for insurance money. The nadir was the blackout of 1977, a night of looting and chaos that terrified the nation. Yet, even in the ruins, culture bloomed. The graffiti-covered subway trains carried the sounds of a new genre born in the Bronx, hip-hop. Downtown, the punk scene exploded at CBGB. The 1980s brought a Wall Street boom, epitomized by the soaring twin towers of the World Trade Center, but also the devastation of the crack epidemic. It wasn't until the 1990s that the city truly turned a corner. Under new policing strategies, crime rates plummeted. Times Square was cleaned up, disnified, and tourists returned in droves. By 2000, New York was safer and wealthier than ever before. Chapter 7, Resilience and Rebirth, 2001-present. The modern era began with a scar. The September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks destroyed the World Trade Center, killing nearly 3,000 people. It was an attempt to break the city's spirit, but it failed. New Yorkers rallied with a unified toughness that inspired the world. The site was rebuilt with the solemn reflecting pools and the defiant One World Trade Center. The following decade saw a massive physical transformation. Industrial waterfronts in Brooklyn and Queens were rezoned for glass luxury towers. The High Line, an abandoned rail track, became a world-famous park, symbolizing the new luxury city. However, challenges remained. Hurricane Sandy, 2012, flooded the subways and plunged the city into darkness, a stark warning of climate change. In 2020, the city became the global epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, shutting down completely for the first time in history. Yet, the city has roared back once again. From the Dutch trading post to the global megacity, the story of New York is one of constant death and rebirth. It is a city that burns down, crashes, and struggles, only to rise higher, faster, and louder than before.